Jasmine, I'm so excited that you're here. Welcome to the Sober Butterfly. How are you?
Yes, thank you. I am so great and really excited to be here too and just like have this conversation with you. And I love meeting more like women in recovery and just being in a space where we can really express what the experience is like, sometimes past, present, and future kind of ideas and thoughts. So grateful, glad.
I'm grateful to have you here and I'm glad that you're here. So, before we go deep, because I want to hear all about the nuances and the heart of your story, I would love to open and kind of break the ice with some quick rapid fire questions. Is that
Ooh,
cool?
yeah.
Jasmine, if you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
Ooh, I would say one of the first words is thoughtful
Okay.
and determined and empathetic.
Thoughtful, determined, and empathetic. All
Yes.
amazing adjectives and great things to
Thanks.
be. I would love to know from you if you could have dinner with any sober celebrity, who would it be?
Oh man. Okay. I'm not gonna tell any lies. I don't know off the top of my head a lot of sober celebrities. So
Fair.
okay.
Any celeb then. Just we're opening it up to anyone.
Oh, okay. So if we're opening it up to anyone, I would have to oh, Glennon Doyle. Forget that. I do have a sober so I
Ooh.
don't know if we consider her a celebrity, if she considers herself a celebrity, but thousand
The
percent.
author?
Yes, the author.
Yeah.
I think that she is just oh my, such a raw, like exquisite human who lives so richly in her body and in her mind and her spirit. And I have so much respect and admiration for that. Yeah. So she would definitely be my person. I'm like famous. She's absolutely famous, but I don't know if she considers herself a celebrity, but definitely her.
I think that's an amazing answer. And she wrote Untamed, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're listening at home, make sure you purchase, if you haven't read already, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. That's a
Absolutely.
good answer. And then one more question for you, getting to know Jasmine. What's one thing you can do now that drunk you never could?
Oh my, the list is quite long, but drunk me could never ever share in a room full of people. Drunk me would
Really?
never have, I was such a mute. I was so like be seen, not heard because I never really wanted, I didn't say I never wanted to. I always wanted to take up some sort of space and be, be notable like everybody else wants to be heard and seen in one capacity or another. But sober me has so much courage, you
I love
know?
that.
So yeah, drunk me would have never, I wouldn't be doing this,
Mhm,
you know? So,
mhm. I can resonate with that. I've always been like someone who overshared, but like not with intention. Like I just sort of said
mhm,
things for the sake of holding space or speaking, but now I'm very thoughtful. Am I adding value? Like that's how I
love
see
that.
things now. So I resonate with that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And speaking of speaking up, I would love to hear a little bit more about your story. So tell us more about early days. Like what was life like for you, Jasmine? Even going back to like childhood, I always like to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
What influence, if any, did alcohol play in your early upbringing or those early moments of life?
Yeah. So, I mean, I come from a family of alcoholics, right? Not my whole family, but there are direct lineage, my grandfather, my father. And for me, at 14, I discovered alcohol. So I had a history of like my dad was incredibly violent towards my mom. So my mom had a lot of womb trauma. She lived in a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. And for years, that was, my brothers and I, that was our lives. And so life went on. Then I had a stepdad, and that just things kept hitting the fan, right? And when I turned 14, I was like, oh, sex and alcohol make things feel better. Like I used to write. I used to love to write. I mean, I would go outside and I also used to like to break things. I would take coffee mugs, I would break them in this like park area, and I would write poems. And I mean like endless writing. And that was my escape before alcohol and boys or sex. But then when I discovered alcohol at 14, I mean, I was a blackout drinker from the get-go. Like, and
Mhm.
I kind of stayed with that binge drinking habit because, at 14, it wasn't easy to drink daily. So that never occurred. And then as I grew up, I think that I never knew anything about like programs to help you live in recovery, even though my dad and grandfather and stepdad were alcoholics. I never knew anything about any programs that were offered. So I always thought like alcoholics look like them. Alcoholics look like the men. Alcoholic looks like the deadbeat dad. And I just did not
Mhm.
equate myself to that because I was this young woman and I didn't drink every day. I drank like on the weekends when I would party, which at 20 years old, everybody's doing that, you
Right.
know? But I was a habitual blackout. I put myself in harm's way many a times. And I would say to myself, oh, I'm so, brave. And I would like have this thought, but I was just reckless. I didn't care if I lived or died from, I think the traumatic things that I experienced. There was, domestic violence, there was sexual abuse, there was abandonment, there was a lot happening in my world as a young human and big feelings. I'm a big feeler, and I think is one of my biggest gifts and also probably one of my biggest curses because, again, feeling everything so deeply all the time means that I also feel fear, rage, anger, disgust, sadness, grief. Like I feel all of these feelings and I didn't know what to do with all of them. There was nobody saying, like, hey, you had this experience. It does hurt and it should hurt and you shouldn't have to feel that. And I had, I remember I was so angry and mean to my dad when he would call from prison because I wanted him so badly in my life. But I thought if I'm mean to him, this would be how he'll like come around again. If I like make him feel
Right.
bad. And so much of my behavior was me trying to find ways to express myself without putting myself in vulnerable positions. So I would get drunk so I could be like, so I could have all my feelings and then move through them.
Interesting. I can relate to parts of your story. I also, from a young age, was a blackout drinker. I was
Mhm.
chasing something. I was deeply sensitive, and I think alcohol provided a means for me to unleash some feelings that I was bearing, essentially.
Mhm.
But usually, when they came out, it was in a destructive way that was detrimental to me and my well-being. So I really want to commend you for sharing that. And I feel like if anyone at home can resonate with that, that is like the beauty of this. So
Yeah.
at what point, you mentioned too, because I also can resonate with sex as well as alcohol, like that combination as being a way to connect or feel like
Mhm.
you're connecting with people. So can you give us a little bit more detail around like in terms of sex or in terms of being able to unlock or unleash something within yourself? Like how
Yeah.
did that come to life for you?
I think that I was deeply insecure, right? So I also had like a lot of body dysmorphia. Again, there was a lot of sexual trauma in my young life, which aside from, living in a neighborhood where people didn't look like me, I felt fat all the time. I felt disgusting all the time. So I was trying to find ways to like mask these insecurities, but eventually they would meet me at the door anyways because I would end up being so drunk that I would be crying and showing all of my feelings. But I started using sex as a way to like slow the thoughts down,
Okay.
and like
Yeah.
I think when you talk about like the disease of alcoholism, I would slow the thoughts down until they were just like there was nothing there,
Yeah.
until I felt nothing and then the switch would happen and I would black out and then I felt everything. And I don't usually remember, but the stories I was told after. I used sex as a release. It was also like I don't know, like, the body keeps the score. Like, a lot of things being trapped, I was
Yeah.
always trying to find a way to get the feeling. Like, I have very visceral responses to things, and I'm very self-aware. And so I now know, like, when I'm being heightened, I can feel it, I can sense it, and I now have all these healthy ways to navigate through, like, being triggered by this from a past event, right? But back then, any hairpin thing, any nuance would set me off, and I didn't know how to cope. So I couldn't wait until I was able to drink my way through it,
I
until I
see.
was able to drink my way through the feelings so I could overreact, so I could, I should not say that. Overreacting is not appropriate. I was
Release.
reacting accordingly. Yes, so
Yeah.
I could release without feeling vulnerable because I would be like, "Oh, I was just upset because I was drunk." Like I don't
Yeah.
actually care because I had learned long ago that caring or being vulnerable always made me unsafe,
Mm,
you know? So I definitely
absolutely.
use sex and alcohol as a way of like literally a physical release too. A part of it was I just needed to feel the physical. I had all this pent up feeling and it was causing me visceral responses and like somatic things. So I just thought, oh, sex will help. I
Yeah.
used it as a literally a mechanism to cope.
I understand that. I totally understand. And I'm really sorry to hear about the abuse that you faced or
Thank you.
suffered because that can really shape our relationships, and not even just to other people, but how we view ourselves. And
Absolutely.
it's crazy. I don't want to objectify you in any way, Jasmine, but like as I look at you, you are stunning, like
Thank
absolutely
you.
beautiful. It's so interesting how, as someone who is like aesthetically gorgeous, you felt so insecure about yourself
Mhm.
and may have felt like you weren't maybe like deserving or like worthy of true love, or we just use sex as a way to release, to your point, release feelings
Right.
that we pent up. Or for me it was definitely a way of seeking connection that I felt
Mhm.
I was missing in my life. And
Right.
I didn't grow up with my father being a constant presence in my life. So I would look for attention from the opposite sex. And growing up, of course, as you develop and you turn into a woman, quote, a woman, even before the age of legally
Mhm.
18, a way in which I felt connection or was looking for connection was through the male gaze. And I've had to do a lot of work in therapy to undo some of those coping mechanisms, to your point, but also just like the way in which I view my worth and my self worth, not connected to the way a man sees me or what I can do for him,
Yep.
especially in a sexual
Yeah.
environment or a
Yeah.
situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I liked a relationship because I was like, good, now I can always get my physical release. And I thought it was so important to make sure he wanted me in this way. Like that was all I needed for a relationship to work out. Right. And it was
Yeah.
like, no. And I remember like my high school boyfriend, not to take it too far, but I would, put myself literally in harm's way. I would get on the back of motorcycles with men I didn't know. And I would
Oh,
go and I would do, I
been
mean, there
there.
was other little drops of drugs in my story. And I would go and do some cocaine here and I would do this and I would do that. And then I would call him and I'd be so upset and he'd come get me. And then,
Hmm.
we'd have sex and he would reprimand me or yell at me. And I would just like, oh, I'm getting his time and attention. This is so good. It works out really well. And again, I was just reckless. I think up until age 25, I just did not care if I lived or died. It just,
Wow.
I don't think I was super conscious aware of it, but I look back at actions and when I became sober, I look back at like, oh my God, like it didn't matter to me. And I think there was times where I was seeking an escape because I thought if I die, I have power. I can just start over. Who knows what it'll look
Mm.
like, but it won't look like
Yeah.
this life, you know?
Yeah. That's scary when you have
Hmm.
perspective and you recognize, but the beautiful thing is like you're in this place now, you have the perspective and you recognize how much you were suffering. It just sounds
Yeah.
like, when I think back to early days or like the inner me, inner child work, right? Like you want to go back and hug that person. Like they desperately
Hmm.
just needed a hug. Were you attracted to men who were older than you? Is there a connection to like seeking a father type figure? Because you mentioned like you would call your boyfriend and he would come get you, and it's like then he would reprimand you, but like it's still like state of like, oh, this person cares. Like, yeah, they're upset with
Hmm.
me, but now they're also here for me, and like now we have some other connection. Did you
Yeah.
ever go for the older guy?
All my boyfriends are older than me.
Same.
Again, I don't even, I guess I didn't even realize like that was back then. I didn't realize it was rooted in that, but they were older than me. Like even my ex-husband is like a couple years older than me. And I was like, when I met him, I was like, maybe a little too young,
Yep.
not mature enough, which it did prove to be that. But
Yeah.
I was like, I looked for that. And I think, when I go back and look at my high school boyfriend, like, thank goodness for him because when we became young adults, I was able to say to him, like, I'm so sorry. I tried to make you my dad. Like I
Mm.
made you have to like take care of me. And I didn't sometimes like I had no business in these situations, but obviously again, I was sick and I wasn't healthy. So he understood and like I haven't talked to him in years, but at the time I was able to articulate him like to him, I apologize for causing your nervous system such distress all the time.
Right, right. Yeah, I can relate to that so much. I'm just like
Mhm.
thinking, even to this day, I tend to go for older men.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm aware of, whereas before, I don't think I was making that connection either.
Mhm.
So interesting. You recognize from those early years until 25, you had pretty much little care about like your longevity,
Mhm.
like your well-being essentially.
Yeah.
Did something happen around that time frame to where you shifted, or was there a turning point in your story to where you started to value life, like this is a sacred thing that I
Yeah.
should hold dear to myself and live accordingly?
Yeah. Well, I had my first daughter. My just sweet little tiny human who's
Oh
full of
my god.
sass. I really truly, and this just came over me like a few months ago. I did not think I was gonna live past 25. Like I just, my
Mm,
brain was just like, "You're not, girl. It's all good. Just live out these glory years, right?" And
right.
then I just a few months ago remembered like, "Oh my God, I was pregnant with my first daughter at 25. Like I was meant to, I believe, keep going, and
Yeah.
living my life. And I didn't get sober then, right? But I I thought motherhood would make me better. I thought it would automatically thrust me into feeling better. Now, did it give me purpose to live? So I no longer like felt this pull that I felt like this very strong pull to eventually one day like die. I didn't feel that as strong. It was still there, and we can get to that later, but I didn't feel it as strong. So I felt like, oh, I have a reason to wake up in the morning. I have somebody to take care of. I have somebody to give all of this love and empathy and this like natural nurturer that I am. I now have somebody like this in my little world, and I had her dad at the time, and I thought I had romanticized our life completely, and it wasn't that I was in an abusive marriage, but I didn't see it like that at the time, but definitely having my first daughter and then 16 months later having our second daughter,
Oh
they
my god.
just became everything to me, everything. And I remember when I did get sober, I remember my therapist said, what an incredible burden to put on your daughters to be your happiness. Because that's it. I was not
Mm,
happy in any other circumstance unless something to do with them, and even then, I still wasn't feeling happy or fulfilled.
happy.
And I was like angry, like all I ever wanted was to be a mom. Like since I was a little girl walking around with little baby dolls everywhere, you know, all I ever wanted was to be a mom, and now I'm a mom and I'm not jumping for joy every day. Why am I still miserable up here and in here? What's wrong with me? And I still did not directly equate it to you're an alcoholic and you have a soul sickness and you've been suffering, maybe for lifetimes. Who knows? But this is the moment.
I got chills when you said that your therapist mentioned that what a burden to put on your daughters, but like also the pressure that you put on yourself, right? Like
Mhm.
this, if this is my life's calling, this is my purpose, why don't I feel fulfilled? Why don't I
Mhm.
feel like this is enough? And I want to get to like how you can get to that place of
Yeah.
feeling like it is enough, but it's not necessarily connected to an outside entity, right?
Mhm.
That's what I believe at least. I'm not a mom, but like I can imagine the pressure you must have put on yourself at that time as being a young mother in your mid 20s, like, oh, this is everything I've wanted, the happy nuclear family. You romanticized it. I would love to touch on, 25 to like 27, you're a new mom with two kids under 2 years
Mhm.
old. And you mentioned that your husband was also not the husband that you maybe signed up for or wanted to be with.
Yeah.
What role did substances play at this time? So was your husband also mirroring some of your drinking patterns or using patterns?
Mhm.
And how did his abuse manifest in the relationship at this
Yeah.
time?
So to his, I don't want to say defense, but to help understand him for a pocket in this scenario, he is a product of an alcoholic, right? Of one parent.
Mhm.
And I will say that, and that is I'm allowed to say it, it's the facts. And so I think that there were moments where he was giving me quote grace, or that's what I was interpreting it as. But
Okay.
realistically, he was just building armor to to take against me. And because again, my drinking was the same. So my ex-husband was an athlete. So we would go to a lot of events and we were always with a lot of people. And at the time, again, my serious low self-esteem. So at face value, you look at me and you're like, oh, she must feel great about herself. Well, no.
Right.
Like everything else in here and in here, again, sick and dark and just not happy. And so we would go to these events and I would be the person that was like, oh, does everybody want to drink? Let's get a glass of wine. And, a lot of walking and mingling and talking. And because I didn't
Mhm.
feel like I was at the same value level of these people, based on education or based on professionalism or based on, relationships, I was like, okay, I'm gonna drink a little more right now because again, I was
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I couldn't be in my skin, and I felt like everybody could see me naked and see my literal scars, see my metaphorical scars. It's like they could see me and they could just shame me every step I was taking, which was me in my mind, but I didn't know it at the time. So I always ended up relatively intoxicated at events. I would end up being blacked out. Like I was the girl that would like sneak a bottle of wine like in the car so I could drink it, or like I would do
Mhm.
4 or 5 more shots right before we left so that I
Yep.
could like make sure the buzz was going, and then I'd end up blacked out. It was, I mean, I reflect now, I have so many girlfriends throughout my ex-husband's time in the league that are like, I don't ever remember you being drunk. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, that night, him and I definitely fought. I was definitely blacked out. But it's
Yeah.
because I would go home and do 5 more shots.
Yeah.
But I was always the girl who was like watching somebody sipping their wine and being like, is she gonna ever finish so we can mosey over back over to the bar? Or like at the restaurant, I'd be like with my hype friends, I'd be like, you wanna do a couple shots for dinner? Like,
Yeah.
we're having a regular dinner. Like, there was no reason for it. But again, my super discomfort, I was like, I can't say to them I'm wicked uncomfortable because I can't be vulnerable. So I can't show that I feel less than they are. So
Yeah.
I need to just drink my way into, I don't even know that I thought I was going to drink my way into being social. I just thought I was going to drink my way into quieting my mind, you
Got
know?
you.
Because I
So
was social.
you were overcompensating for your perceived lack of, like, you feeling less than in these social
Right.
circles. I always refer to alcohol as a social lubricant, right? It just
Mhm.
loosens you up, and then you're able to or feel as though you're more equipped to socialize or
Mhm.
maybe sound more intellectual. Like, we are sometimes our own worst enemy, and we tell ourselves these lies that other people can't detect. And to your point, people are probably looking at you like, wow, Jasmine has it all together. She has, her man and her kids, and she looks great, and she's, a social person, and no one's picking up on these very internal but very loud conversations or discourse that you're having with yourself or within
Right.
yourself, which can be really, really powerful. Were there ever any instances where your husband blatantly or directly said to you, I think that you have a problem with alcohol?
No. No, not
No.
until the very end, which is when there was an incident that occurred. It was NFLPA, which is like the Players Association for the NFL. We were in Miami. We'd gone to this thing a dozen times, right? Or 5 times. But this particular time, I got blacked out drunk. We got into an argument because I was dealing with somebody who was being dishonest as far as like cheating, being dishonest
Mm,
financially. Like, I didn't have a job. I was at this point years of like no income. I was moving state to state with him in the league with our 2 children. And so there was a lot of gaslighting, and I already had insecurities again around my intellectual capabilities. And so I was starting to think I was going crazy. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm
mm,
losing my mind. Like, and the last incident happened March of 2020. I was blacked out intoxicated. We got into a big argument. My cousin, who's like a sister to me, that's my girl. She's so chill and like so non-confrontational. And apparently she had tried to stop me from one of my biggest things that I would do when I was blacked out drunk is I'm leaving. I'm walking, I'm driving, I'm running, I'm getting out. I'm doing something. Y'all
yeah.
are not
Yeah.
containing me, right? And so that was always my thing. And so my ex-husband could stronghold, he could minimize that from happening, but not my cousin. Apparently I pushed her. I don't remember, but the next day, my mom, my best friend, and my cousin they all sat me down. They were like, listen, first off, you pushed Taylor. Like, and I was devastated by that. Because again, she's just incredibly gentle. Like, she would never, ever, there's no ever a justification. And I was repeatedly saying I was going to kill myself. I was like, I know,
Mm,
even when I'm sober, that is going to be how I'm going to die. I had tried when I was 9, when I was 14, and a month before I met my ex-husband, I had attempted suicide. So it scared them, and it scared me because I was like, oh, I don't realize how loud those thoughts are when I'm sober, right? Because they're
mm,
in here and they're
yeah.
loud, but I've been hearing them since I was a little girl. So it wasn't like I knew. It's hard to explain. It's like screaming underwater. That's what they must have
Mm,
sounded like in here. But every time I would get drunk, I would bring up all the traumas of my past and I would cry. And then my ex maybe he would cheat on me, or maybe he would lie to me and not pay this bill, or maybe he would not do this or do that. And because I behaved like that last Saturday, I had been drunk and calling him a liar or a coward. Him and I would both avoid me the next day. So I didn't
I
want to talk
see.
about what I had done. And it was like, I felt so guilty for getting drunk on Saturday, even though I said I wasn't going to drink for 30 days. And then here I am 2 weekends later getting drunk and, you know, being horrible. So I would have sex with him, like sex would make it better. And
Yep.
then I felt like it didn't give me the right to say to him, hey, like, you're cheating on me, and hey, you're lying to me, and hey, you're calling me stupid, and hey, you're calling me the B word, and hey, you're yelling at me a lot. Like, and I know
Mhm,
I have problems, and like, but you're like really mean to me. But the last
mhm,
time was March of 2020, and it hurt my heart so bad. It scared me to know that they were like, you keep saying even when you're sober, you know that that's how you're going to leave the earth. And I'm like, I don't remember saying that, but I could see it
Yeah.
because my history of attempting when I couldn't, when I didn't think I could survive what I was experiencing or what I was feeling inside.
I'm sorry to hear that, Jasmine. It makes me sad to know that you were in so much pain. And to your point, like the subconscious brain, whether you recognize it or not in your sober
Mm-hmm.
mindset, like something inside of you, like was screaming, and whether
Mm-hmm.
you were trying to subdue it or trying to quiet or quell that noise with substances or dismiss it, it still was something inside of you that needed to be addressed head on. And I
Mm-hmm.
can only imagine how difficult it was to hear your family, the people that love you, congregate around you, trying to pour into you and saying, hey, like you pushed Taylor and you said these things, and like we are so concerned. And I think that's something jarring too when you black out and you can't remember, but like there's some truth there. Like
Yes.
that like you trust these people. So like them
Mm-hmm.
reporting it back to you like, wait, no, I didn't mean it, because like I used to hate when people referenced, the old adage, oh, drunken words are sober thoughts. And I'd be like, no,
Yes.
no, no. But mostly I would say, yeah, there was something inside of me that was true for. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
the reckoning, like trying to combine, there's something inside of me that I can't quite get out, but also like in my sober mind, I've been so good at like dismissing that. So like
Mm-hmm.
when those two worlds collide, or when those two parts of you come together, it's like really hard to confront and deal with. So of course I want to hear how you moved forward from that experience
Yeah.
in March 2020. But one quick note that I want to say about your ex, obviously I don't know this man, but girl, I can resonate so hard with like someone's doing you wrong, and because you are on a substance, like I would get drunk or blackout, and I also dabbled with other substances, so it would
Mm-hmm.
be like I would be such a fire like ball, or just do something so egregious that like even though the other person wronged me first, now
Mm-hmm.
I'm in apology mode in my sober state, and I can't even tackle or address all of their wrongdoings that were done to me because I overreact, or not overreacted to your point
Yeah, I know what
earlier,
you mean.
but I responded in a way
Mm-hmm.
that was so like so I can't even find the word,
So
Jasmine.
poor,
Like,
so
yeah,
unhealthy.
so unhealthy. That's a good way to frame it. So
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy that like I feel shame now. I can't even get to the nitty gritty, or like get to the heart of what caused me to even go off the deep end
Yep.
to begin with. And so I can resonate. And I think it's a form of emotional manipulation. And people, I think specific to my past with relationships, I think they knew that. And it was a way to
Mm-hmm.
like mitigate the situation from addressing what needed to be addressed in the first place. Because, now if we want to talk, we're going to start with you. And I don't
Yeah,
want to start
yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, we're going to deflect, and we're both going to pretend that this never happened. So I just want to say I resonate with that so much. And it's a
Mhm.
really toxic cycle that you can find yourself. And it's like, not to blame the other person, like you're the reason I drank in the first place because I'm worried about these things.
Mhm.
But it's a form of gaslighting, it feels like now
Yeah.
I'm like stuck, and I feel like I can't ever get out what I need to in a healthy
Mhm.
way, to your point. But yeah,
Yep.
take us back to March 2020. Take us back to March 2020 after your family's telling you that you had these really dark
Mhm.
thoughts that came to light. What was that like for you?
So, took my cousin to dinner that same night, and I was, like, apologizing, but for me, when I heard it, to your point about blacking out, I don't know, I was likely pride, ego, and fear, but I heard it, and I was very apologetic for I was so focused on the fact that I pushed my cousin. I was like, who cares about what I said? I'm not gonna do that. I'm a mom."
Yeah.
I was like, I'm a mom. Moms don't do that." Like, in my head, I was like,
Yeah.
"I'll never leave my
Yeah.
daughters," but, like, so I just was trying to just avoid y'all. Just who cares that I said that? We're moving on. I didn't say that to them, but that I so desperately wanted them to focus on the fact that I pushed Taylor and like that I got in a fight with
Yeah.
him and that our baby was crying and I was still yelling and like I was like, everybody, please just ignore that I said I was going to kill myself. I'm obviously not. But deep down, I was afraid. It was the first moment of like, oh my God, I thought I was doing a good job. I thought I was doing a good job of these voices.
Mhm.
I thought they were getting smaller. I thought the sound bite was getting less like deafening. I thought I was getting healthier because I was married and I had two kids, and we had what I thought was a good financial standing, and I had some friends, and I had started volunteering for this domestic violence shelter, which there are layers before March 2020, like mildly just before that. I was always being pulled to get sober, right? Like, I think when you get sober, that's something calls you there, but I might have been calling me for a long time.
Yeah.
And my ex did say to me one time, like, you always say you're going to go to therapy, or all you do is cry about all the stuff that's happened to you when you were younger every time you get drunk, and you always say you're going to go to therapy. And finally I was like, all right, he has a point. I do always say I'm going to go to therapy, and then
Mhm.
I don't. So I got a therapist, and thank goodness for Polly. I got a therapist. She's not my therapist anymore, but at the time, I started working with her,
Mm.
and then I ended up going into like hypnosis therapy. Like, so I had two talk therapists and hypnosis therapy. And my primary therapist that I was seeing at that time, we were also going into couples therapy with a team therapist, which was a horrible idea, but I was going with it. Because at this point, I mean, the name calling and the yelling was getting so bad. And I was like, because I was starting to challenge more, because after March 2020, I was like, all right, slow down. So I was like, oh, 30 days no drinking, whoop, whoop. And then I would drink casually a little bit, like, and then maybe I would get blacked out, but I would like just have a lot of sex and not be too crazy, like, so it was fine. And when I started going into therapy, I started I wasn't telling anybody what was actually going on. Like, on the outside, everything was what I wanted it to be. I was the Disney story. It was perfect. I was always a damsel in distress. I was my greatest show. I could always find myself somewhere in distress, waiting on a man to come on. And my ex was that for me. He was the ultimate, like, I had poured all my traumas into him, and he was like, I love you anyways. So I thought, right? And I will say that
Mhm.
to I'm never placing my alcoholism on anybody else. I mean, I remember when I filed for divorce, I told him, like, you did not create this sickness in me, this darkness, but dark does not seek out light. Dark seeks out dark. So naturally it had to be darker than what I'm suffering through. And you just fed the beast, and you knew you were feeding the beast, and you said, checkmate. Every
Mm.
time I feed the beast, I get to do what I want to do. I get to go and lie and cheat and steal and do whatever. March of
Yeah.
2020 was the, okay, maybe you should get a therapist. Then my therapist was like, hey, maybe we should explore a treatment center. And I was like, that's cute. I'm not leaving my daughters for any period of time ever again. And she's like,
Mm.
maybe a treatment center that's really focused on like trauma and like healing and like your inner child. And she's like, you need to go somewhere. She had yet to say to me, you're an alcoholic. She did not even,
Right.
that it didn't even come across her like verbiage. And I was like, okay, a place that deals with trauma, like maybe. And it took me all the way until July to actually go. And I had done months of like circling around this couple places, because it was also during COVID. So there was a lot of fear for me in general leaving my daughters.
Right.
But it was what made me, okay, I need to go to treatment. And having my therapist who was like, Jasmine, you need treatment. I vividly remember one of the greatest gifts I got in early sobriety, early, leaving an abusive marriage, early, like, 180ing my life, was I was desperately seeking clarity. I mean, I was so afraid I was losing my mind, because I swear, when you're with somebody and it sometimes can be hard for people who are onlooking, just the same way people who are not in recovery, to understand how you can't stop drinking, how you can't stop drugging, how you can't leave an abusive relationship. But I got to the point where, I mean, I couldn't. If you told me if you told me that wasn't a butterfly, and I'm looking right at that butterfly behind you, but at this point now you're screaming at me
Mhm.
and you're telling me it's not a butterfly, and maybe you throw in some like poor adjectives about me. By the time we're done, I'm either like, you know what, it's not a butterfly. I don't care. I'm too exhausted to care. Or I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if it's a butterfly. Is it? I'm not sure. That was the point I was in my relationship. I was losing. None of my thoughts felt like I made any sense ever. So then eventually, like, just before I went to treatment, I basically became a mute. I didn't say much. I didn't do much. I didn't have much of an opinion. I just was starting to really become a shell of myself. And the shell that was inside of me, very hollow, was starting to come out. And I don't know if I'm going too far ahead, but I remember when I share this with sometimes clients or sometimes other women, I remember very vividly my mom was coming to Florida to visit, and our daughters were napping, my ex was at practice, and our oldest came down. I had like a bowl of salsa. It was a beautiful, like sunny day. I had a bowl of salsa on the couch. And she didn't take a nap, so I was like, whatever, just get up. I'm already frustrated as a mom. You're like, you need a nap so I can finish my book. And she came down and she like jumped up onto the couch, and I kept telling myself, move the salsa. It's like silly thing, just move the salsa. And I was like, no, she's supposed to be sleeping. Again, super juvenile. And this whole bowl of salsa spills onto our carpet. And I remember like looking at her and then looking at this very like small situation, but I felt nothing. Like I looked at my child and I wasn't angry. I wasn't
Mm,
sad. Mean, I was like looking right through her. She might as well have not even been standing there. I was just so like, whatever.
mhm,
And we went to pick up my mom from the airport, my daughters and I. And my mom got in and I was like, Mom, my heart like physically hurts and I don't know what to do about it. Like I'm scared. It hurts. It like, hurts so bad and
mhm,
I'm having physical pains and I don't know how to make it stop. And she had already known a couple things that were going on because she had now called a couple phone calls of like he'd be screaming at me. I'm telling him, you need to leave for now because we need to figure this out. The kids are here. It was getting worse because I think I started to get into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And I was like, all right, well, I wasn't thinking if I'm leaving him, but I was thinking, okay, if I have to fight to stay alive, like some sort of like thing in me needs to stay alive, then I got to start like speaking up. I got to start questioning things. I got to start challenging these stories he's telling me. Then when I decided, okay, I'm going to go to treatment, it was our wedding anniversary day before, and we had wine from like Spain or something. And I was like, oh, well, too bad I'll never drink that wine. He was like, why not? And I was like, well, because remember, I'm trying to not drink for 30 days before I leave for treatment. And he's like, well, you could just have a little. And I remember thinking to myself, somebody that loves me
mm,
would see it wouldn't be hard to see like the amount of that's going on in my brain because I don't want to drink it, but I want to
mm.
drink it. Like I don't want to drink it, but I want to
Yeah.
drink it. And it's like I am suffering so deeply in this nuancing question, and I just needed some support. And then there was things that happened after treatment, but I was dying for clarity because I thought I'm losing my mind. Like I'm going to literally have a nervous breakdown. And then just like a week before treatment, my brother came to visit and I don't think I've ever experienced, I don't know if there's a difference of like physical depression in my life that I can remember. I'm sure like in my drunken days there were moments, but I remember I physically felt like I weighed bricks and I like was laying in the bed. I could not get up. Day two, my brother was like, you're acting like mom, get up, like go downstairs, do something with your day. And so I got up, I attempted
Mm,
to make my daughter's lunch for school. And I was like, I can't, I can't. And I just got back in
yeah.
bed and that terrified me. And I was like, all right, I have to get signed up for treatment. I have to do it. And it still took me 30 days to actually to commit to it because I was terrified. I had all these issues around, am I going to abandon them? Do they think I'm abandoning them? Can they survive without me? Like, I'm going to have dad. And then my mom was here and we had a babysitter and like we had things in place. My brother was here, but I was scared. And the reality was I was
Yeah.
afraid of, you know, I had romanticized this idea that like if I can't change me, right? I was hoping I would get to treatment and they would say, your husband's a saint, you're crazy. You need to change. And I'd be like, yes, me, I could change me. Okay. But
Yeah.
no, they were like, your husband's abusing you and you're an alcoholic and you have an extensive history of trauma. And we're gonna work on some of
Mm,
this and you're not gonna drink. And that is a separate thing. You're not gonna do nothing for him. You can't change him, you can't control him. You have to focus here and then you'll see what comes out of focusing here, what comes out of moving over there. And so I just vividly remember these like little magic moments, I would say, like little micro miracles, I call them. But I was on the phone outside with my brother the night before I was leaving and I'm crying. I have three brothers. One of them, two weren't here. And I was crying. I'm like, Anthony, I just can't leave the girls. They're going to feel abandoned. Like, what would they think? What if I can't do it? And he puts me on hold,
mm.
and I look up, and a shooting star went by. And I'm like big on like these signs, right? I know. I was like,
Wow.
if
Me
he
too.
never said hold on, I would have been deep in the call. And I'm like chiefing a cigarette. I'm stress smoking. I don't even smoke, but I'm just like I used to smoke. So I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, this is a coping mechanism again. Um,
Yeah.
I used to smoke cigarettes, and I'd be like, I need a cigarette. I can't breathe.
I'm laughing too because like I've definitely said that.
Crazy,
Yeah.
but yeah. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of clarity. I mean, I'm whiplash. I'm in the ocean just getting tossed around, like fighting for my life or breath. But each breath I take is like a breath of like, you're going to survive this.
Yeah.
You have to do the
Yeah.
work. It has to feel this way right now because you are deep in the middle of a hurricane right now, in a tsunami, in the middle of the ocean, and it's not going to be the easiest thing to get out of. Even now, I'm like, I'm still in the ocean, but I have learned now that like I can lay back and I can float when I'm feeling stressed, and I can let the sun, literally and metaphorically be with me. And I don't have to
Mm.
constantly be treading water. I was always in fight, flight, freeze, acquiesce mode. I lived in that.
When you live in that there's a source of comfort there because it's what
Yeah.
you know. It's like all you know, and I think a big part of you becoming more withdrawn, it sounds like conditioning, a form of conditioning. Like, to your point with the butterfly behind you, if I'm like, "No, that's a snail. What are you
Hmm.
talking about? Like, you're crazy." Like, that gaslighting, I know this term gets thrown around a lot, but, like, the whole premise of gaslighting is that it comes from an old Alfred Hitchcock movie where literally it's gradual.
Hmm.
Like, you put your hand over the stove and it, like, gets turned up one knob or notch at a time to where it's like you don't realize until it's too late, like, "Oh, my hand's
Yeah.
on fire." But it's such a gradual process that, like, it's a form of conditioning. You don't even realize it, and it's like if you're being told you're crazy, you're wrong, you're this, you're that, and then the juxtaposition being on the surface, life looks pretty. This is what I've
And I
everything I've
couldn't give that
wanted,
up
right? This is what I'm
willingly.
supposed to want. Right. Yeah, like, it's really that duality can be really, really hard and confusing, and I think sometimes we have guilt and shame where it's like, "I have so much to be grateful for," but it's like, how can you be present and be the best version of self for yourself,
Hmm.
first and foremost, but then for your daughters and show up in the way, that they deserve, that you wanna give to them, but you're literally stifled or riddled with grief or
Fear.
grief slash guilt slash fear, like, I don't want to leave them. How can I leave them as their mom? But it's like, how can I be the mom they
Hmm.
need if I don't do the work that I need to do on myself? Sometimes there are things in our path that, like, present themselves as a form of support, because it sounds like, your husband was like, your ex was like, oh yeah, go to
Hmm.
therapy, do the work. But when you really start to do the work and challenge him, it's also like broken bird
Hmm.
syndrome, where it's like, oh no, I need you to kind of stay sick so that I don't have to change myself. And this is in regards to maybe your husband or your ex. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, you know, was he on board with treatment? Because it sounds like therapy was one piece, but then when it came time to go to treatment and you're pushing back more, was he like on board with that as well? And then when you got to therapy or treatment, I should say, what were those concrete pieces of feedback you were getting, like, oh, a real change needs to
Yeah.
happen in my life?
So treatment, yes and no. I had set up like real, like, okay, this is the days the babysitter's gonna come. I had made arrangements. I think that treatment, he was on board because he and I both had the same thought that they were gonna be like, yeah. Like he had manipulated the situation enough, but they were gonna be like, yeah, you crazy, you're the problem. He is a, and I think that he thought I was gonna go there and say that.
He's a good man,
Yeah, yeah,
Savannah.
yeah.
He's a good
Like,
man.
I think that he thought I was gonna go there and say that, and I kinda thought I was gonna go there and say that because, again, I was still, "Oh, no, you're not gonna ruin my perfect you're not gonna ruin this picture. It's perfect. Nobody's gonna ruin this beautiful
Mm,
family that I've worked so hard for," you know? And
mm,
so in my mind and in his, I think that he was gearing up to, "Sure, go." And because he was ready to be like, "You left us for 30 days," because that came up. That came that
oh
sometimes
my
still comes
god.
up, and it's been 5 years. So, yeah, I think he was preparing of like, yes. And I can't assume, but I can base it off of previous patterns, right, of behavior of his, that there was probably a thought of like, "Yeah, sure, go. We'll see how long it lasts." Because I had a serious pattern of like, I'm not
Mhm,
drinking for 30 days, and sometimes I'd get 30 days, and then I would right again. The moment I could drink again, I would black out again because I didn't have a stop once I started.
mm,
I think that, and then when I was at treatment, I started having conversations with my therapist or with other women there, with other therapists there in like small groups, and getting feedback or listening in to something else, and I'm like, huh, that's a good moment to like inquire about something. And then he would like try to flip the script. But at this point, I had now clarity. I had other people going, that doesn't make any sense, Jasmine. That just because he's
mm,
saying that, does that make sense? Like, I mean,
mm,
there were things like, my car disappeared for months and months and months, or, financial things were just like financial abuse was crazy because we didn't have electricity on certain occasions. And I'm talking about a professional athlete. And I was like, and I would question that, and I would get called names, and I would screaming at me, and eventually you're just like, okay, forget it. I don't know. But I think when I
yeah,
was in treatment and little things were coming up and I'd have these pockets of time to talk to him, he would again do the lying and do the like focus on you while you're there, and I'm like, okay, I am,
Fuck.
yeah. And
Mhm.
in the factual matter, when I was away, it also gave me a perspective of like, I only miss our daughters. Like, I don't even miss him, and
Ooh.
I don't think I realized it at the
Mm.
time, but I only wanted to ever talk to them because I was so desperate, like, I just wanted to be with them, you know? Like, I wish I could have brought them with me on the journey, which isn't even realistic and wouldn't have been able to get what I needed. But, while I was there, I remember, and this goes back to, like, this physical feeling of my heart hurting, and this was the most one of the most profound moments, of coming alive was we were in a group setting, and where I went to treatment, there was a rock star, and he wouldn't mind if I say his name, but I'm not gonna. He's going on, and at this point, he wasn't there again for like heroin. He was there because he was habitually lying and cheating, and he was like, "I need help," you know. And so we're in
Yeah.
group, and he's like, we're basically in an NA meeting, and he's going on about how all addicts and alcoholics are liars. All we ever do is lie. We just lie to people. We don't care about anybody. And there was a young man who was there in a wheelchair, and he was in the wheelchair because he had been in 2 car accidents in one night. So he
Wow.
was messed up, driving high and drunk, and drove, and then crashed that truck. And lives in the middle of the country, so he was like, "All right, come on, somebody pick me up. I'm going again." Gets in another car. The second time, he crashes and he ends up paralyzed. And he goes, it's his turn to share, and he goes, "Actually, I'm a horrible liar. Like, it doesn't. I feel horrible. Like, I feel nauseated when I lie." He's like, "But like, I don't know. I just don't like it. Like, but I lie to myself." And when he said that, like, oh, I have never had like a more when he said that, I literally like something just like, and I remember feeling like it was like somebody took my heart and went like a wishbone, just like broke it in half. And I felt this physical feeling of my heart breaking. And I stood up and I was like, I have been actively, descriptively, aggressively lying to myself. And it just, when I tell you I sobbed like something died, because I truly believe in my heart that it did. I went outside behind this shed and just, I didn't stop sobbing. I sobbed the whole way out, but I wanted like some sort of semblance of privacy. I sobbed and I sobbed, and I'm being probably like 4.5 hours, because at some point or another, eventually, like, they came to get me, and I went into my little cabin and I was in my shower, and they all knew how much I love music. So nobody's saying anything to me. Nobody goes and says, "Hey, Claudia, like, Jasmine needs her music," because you don't have your phone. You get it for like certain times. But I just remember like Claudia coming and putting my phone like right outside the shower and being like, "You have your music," because it was the water was cold, and I just was sitting in there just sobbing, and I put my music on and I just kept on crying because I couldn't stop. It was like for the first time in my whole life, I was feeling every emotion sober, and the reality had set into me like, I don't like to lie. It makes me, I really suck at it. I truly do wish I was better at it. But like, I had been so violently lying to myself, and it was killing me. And I didn't know what to do with that. And right prior going to treatment, right when I got into treatment, I had told my therapist there and my breathwork therapist there, who saved my life, I had said, if I can't change myself, I'm not going to accidentally give all my girls my burdens, my demons. I will kill myself. I'm like, I will write them these beautiful letters. And I had romanticized, like, I belong in the ocean, so I'm going to do like Virginia Woolf. I'm going to drink a bottle of tequila and I'm going to walk myself into the ocean. Like, I'm not going to ruin them. I'm not going to ruin them even on accident, because I don't intend to, right? What mother, my mom, through all of her things, she loved us. She certainly put me in harm's way, right? And so I just was for sure, I'm like, I'm not going to be that mom. And if I can't do anything about this crazy that I am, because I'm losing my mind, then I'm going to kill myself, and I'm going to write them these beautiful letters. And then they'll at least have an idea of me. And, maybe they'll get a better stepmom or whatever. And there's so many layers to that, but being in treatment for 35 days, being away from somebody who was telling me, "You're crazy, all these traumas, these traumas make you illogical, you can't think clearly," which there were pockets of truth in that, right? Because there were moments where I was behaving erratically, when I would be upset about something, intoxicated. But for the most part, I was pretty level headed and like rational. I would just maybe have big emotional outbursts when I'd be getting gaslit for an hour and a half. And so I remember vividly that moment. It was like all of a sudden I felt the fear and I did it anyway. Like, I knew, okay, now you have to walk into this psychodrama and like have this man that you're in treatment with, and this man that you're in treatment with, be your dad, be your stepdad, be this abuser, be this abuser, be this person. Like, and you're gonna walk through how much this hurts. You're gonna sit in breath work and you're gonna physically feel where your body is holding things, and you're gonna breathe and you're gonna do it. And I remember we did this exercise in breath work, and I started dry heaving. Like, I was like, I hate throwing up. For somebody who was desperate to be skinny, I hate that. Was like one of the things I just could not do. I hated throwing up. And I say that to
Same.
emphasize, like, that's how much I just despised throwing up. And I was
Mhm.
dry heaving really heavily. And I said to Clark, I went into the bathroom and I dry heaved for like a few minutes, and I came back out, and Clark was our breathwork instructor, and he was like, "Are you okay? Do you need the nurse?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, good." Like, again, it was like releasing something here. You know, I had all this pent up, not having any voice, being choked, like all these things. And I was releasing something. And so from that point on, I no longer was going to treatment and pretending like I was going to go home and it was going to be perfect. I did not necessarily know that I was
Mm,
going to leave him. I knew I was going to stay sober because something died. Like, I had
mm,
that that feeling of my heart breaking when I'm like processing, and I've said this story so many times, but I'm just realizing that, like, I had felt that many times as a little girl, but I had quickly, I once I, I would write as a little kid, I would run, I would play. You had a lot of the ways to cope as a kid. Then as a young girl,
mhm,
I would have sex with my boyfriend, I would drink. Then as a young woman, I would do outrageous, dangerous things, and I would drink and I would have sex with my boyfriend. So I kept on finding ways to hurry, sew it up, sew it up, sew it up, It doesn't fully just come undone. But I literally broke, and I didn't rush to put my heart back together. I was just like, what, this is heavy and I can't. I can't pick it up right now. I have to
yep,
leave it just like this, open, vulnerable, maybe susceptible to more harm, but it is a risk I am willing to take because I want to be alive now. I want to be here. I want
yeah,
to mother my daughters. I want to be such an emotional safe space for them, whether that's rage, joy, sorrow. I want to be that for them, and I am that for them. But at the time, I thought these big feelings would kill me. I'm like, I can't,
mm,
you don't experience the things that I've experienced with nowhere for them to go for 29 years, and you do, and you survive them, and but you survive them. For me at least, it had to be in community, and it had to be an incredibly safe community, and
mm,
I had to come out of it right back to the same, literally gaslighting me, telling me if he had papers I wouldn't believe him anyways, and yada yada. And my therapist, I got back on the phone with her, and she said to me, "Jasmine, why are you staying with him?" She's like, "Be
mm,
realistic with yourself. Is it, this reason or this reason or this reason?" She's like, "None of those reasons are there anymore. Why are you staying? What are you doing?" And it was like, I think she knew, to end what she said, "Listen to me. Do you want to go to couples therapy?" Because I kept being like, "Are you going to find us a couples therapist?" Like, you and Claudia, my therapist at treatment, had been discussing, even though I guess in the end they were like, neither one of us are doing that. You're going to be the one to tell her because she's got a year's worth of rapport with you. And she said, "Do you want to go to couples therapy?" And I was like, "No." This was September. I left treatment in August. And she said, "Okay, then, well, ethically, I will not recommend therapy when you're being abused." She's like, "So you need to leave him." And I was like, therapists don't say that to you. So I was like triggered,
mm,
but it just like, yeah, yes, I do, because here I am now, a few weeks out of treatment, and we've had this ongoing argument. He keeps calling me stupid. He called me a stupid, illiterate B word. Like, he keeps on trying to find ways to bring me lower. And I say this to women when I share, when he comes into the story, they're always like, "How did you leave him? Like, how did you know?" And I said, aside from my therapist saying that, I vividly remember we were arguing about the same thing, my car being gone for months and months, and then this other car, and then this whole layers to these lies. And he's screaming at me, and I'm starting to yell back. And because I'm just a couple weeks removed from treatment, I just fell to the ground and started sobbing because I was like, "Okay, what are you gonna do here, girl? Like, you don't got a lot in you. You're just starting to see the mountain. You're
mhm,
not even walking up it yet. You're just starting to see it." And I fell to my knees and I started sobbing. And you would think in that moment, like, somebody that loves you even a tiny would just stop. He kept screaming
mm,
at me, and then he left. And I remember sitting with like my knees in my chest, like almost like a child's pose with my knees together, sitting on the carpet. I don't know how long I was there, but I remember thinking like, this is it. And you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay
Mm,
because your mom has been okay. Your grandmother has been okay. You're going to be okay.
mm,
And you're going to start over and you're going to struggle and it's going to be scary, but you'll be damned, you know? And when I was in treatment, I remember like explaining this analogy that my good girlfriend Cara had given me, who also gave me on Thames, an incredible just woman, friend, mother, survivor. She said to me, you know, we all are born with a glass, right? And like the goal as parents is to not even smudge the glass, right? We don't even want to chip the glass. Like we don't want to do anything to this glass. We want to keep our babies all perfect and never harm them and never hurt them and never cause them any strife. And I said, well, if that's the case, my mom took the glass and was like, fuck it. Excuse me. She just threw it against the wall and it shattered everywhere, right? And one of my friends
mm.
in treatment was like, well, what do you know? You know, stained glass windows are made out of shattered glass. And that was a perspective shift for me. It was this moment
Beautiful.
of like, oh my God,
Mm,
I'm not
mm,
damaged goods. My whole life has been trial and error. I've been cutting my fingers, you know, trying to find these pieces to fix myself. But in all reality, some
mhm.
pieces they're not needed for the picture. You know, I can still create this
Yeah,
beautiful mosaic and live this very rich life. And I'm not even saying monetarily, but live this very rich life
yeah,
with my daughters without a lot of pieces, you know? And it just,
yeah.
again, I think that's why the community is so important. But those pockets of moments just kept pouring into me and just kept reminding me like you're gonna be okay and it's gonna hurt. And I remember, you know, early in sobriety, I spent 2 hours in my car listening to a Dermot Kennedy song in front of the Dollar Tree for 2 hours, the same song, and I sobbed
Mhm.
because it came down to like you're either gonna go get drunk right now or you're gonna feel it, and you're gonna feel it until you feel better or until you feel content or even keeled, until you feel like you can breathe. You're going to feel it, Jasmine, because you can feel these things and you can and you will survive them. There's no two ways about it. And then now I had no doubt of that. I knew it. And so it was like, all right, still sometimes it's gonna hurt, you know?
I have chills, Jasmine. I'm trying to hold it together because like there were moments where I just feel so connected to what you're sharing and it makes me want to cry. It's beautiful and it's painful. And when you were describing your life as broken glass that can create a beautiful mosaic, right? It's also I think like important for your daughters and how beautifully you have daughters too,
I
right? Like you have two
know.
daughters. I think it's so powerful for your daughters to see you assemble the pieces, like not just slap it together, like just, oh, I'm going to make it fit
Mm-hmm.
and destroy yourself in the process of trying to create something, but like actually to do the work and say, like, maybe I'm going to be vulnerable and show my daughters that, like, I would rather have uncertainty or fear in this part of my life that I don't know how it ends, as opposed to staying in a situation that I do know how it ends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going back to what you had mentioned before, and it's a question for you too, like what was the biggest lie you told yourself when you had that breakthrough moment in your session with your community? Like what was the lie, do you think, that you told yourself the most that was anchoring you or holding you back for so long?
I think in twofolds, maybe even as a little trifold. I think one, I was telling myself, "You're fine. It's okay." You know, I was
Mm,
telling, "Stop crying." You know, like that was deeply ingrained in my system. Stop crying. I'm a big feeler. I've been a big feeler kid probably since right out the womb. Um, Next was that you won't survive if you face the darkness. You
mm,
ain't coming out the tunnel, baby girl. You're not gonna make it. You're too far in. You're too far deep in the ocean. You cannot get back. Like there's no point. So just suffer, right? And the other one was that, you know, I cannot face the reality of everybody knowing that I failed at my life. That I got pregnant with somebody. I was never going to be in an abusive relationship. I had left a physically violent man who almost killed me, thinking, well, he doesn't hit me. Like, and I remember telling my therapist, I wish he would
mm.
just, oh God, I remember this. I wish he would just punch me. Then I could just say, look, everybody, I have to leave him. See what he did to
Yeah,
me? And she's
yeah.
like, Jasmine, that, who do you have to show that to? And I'm like, I have to validate something to somebody. So I think one was the, I was afraid, like I can't survive. The next was just like this shame of like, I can't tell anybody. And the other one was just like, where, what to do, like I just didn't see, there was no way, there was no exit strategy that seemed feasible to change. I didn't even think I could at the time. And so I was telling myself, you're fine, it's okay. Suck it up, buttercup. Get over yourself. Like I just had a such negative regard to my emotions. I
Yeah.
thought everything, if I felt anything that was uncomfy, how dare I, essentially, like you are expected to be this way. And that's it. But I was doing that to myself. People didn't expect me to behave that way. I just kept telling myself that because I was always, again, in places I didn't belong with people that didn't care about me. So of course they wanted me to just smile and be there because they didn't have any regard for me as a human being.
Right. Right. So now to go back to you in child's pose, essentially
Mhm.
sobbing in front of a man who's supposed to love you
Mhm.
and honor you and stand by you, especially in early recovery. Like you just came out of treatment.
Mhm.
And to your point, you're open. Like your heart is open. You're
Mhm.
in such a vulnerable place. This is where a lot of people who come out of treatment or who are in early recovery, like this is a time where you're ultra sensitive, and you sitting in the parking lot outside of Dollar Tree listening to the same song. Like, no, literally I've been there too, not like quite literally
Yeah.
there, but I've been in the space where I'm like, two roads diverge, or whatever the
Yeah.
Robert Frost poem is, like in the middle of the woods, and it's like I can take the path that I've always taken. Once again, going back to comfort, like even though I know it's self-destructive, it's something that I'm familiar with, and therefore I want to go that way,
Mhm.
or I can go into the unknown, and that territory feels fucking frightening,
Mhm.
right? So obviously you stayed the course and you decided to stay sober. In the back of your mind, because you've had healing from your therapist, and you're also tapping in. It sounds to me like you're tapping into your inner voice, and you're
Mhm.
recognizing, okay, like even though there are no physical scars, like this is abusive and I need to get out of this. It's me or
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
And so what did you do? Like take us back to that moment. Like was it you being on the floor sobbing and him leaving for you to say like this is it, or like how did you get to the place where you're like I'm done, I don't care what the image looks like, I don't care what people think of me or what the perception is, like I'm
Yeah.
choosing me and my daughters and I'm getting out of here?
Well, I mean, that moment happened after I left treatment, but in treatment, you do this thing called a trauma egg. And essentially, it is like, for me at the time, I felt like I was burying myself alive and I was really struggling to do it. But it's essentially you draw out, you could do stick figures, you have to create images of your traumas so that it hits different parts of the brain, right? It's called a
Mhm.
trauma egg, and they give you a poster and you utilize the space as you need. And so I have, again, extensive histories of traumas. It fills the whole poster. And at the very top of my trauma egg is my current life. And it's, myself, him, our daughters, and they are crouched down in this space and they're saying things like, what, why? And they have a couple tears in their eyes. And the amount of teardrops was really important to like express what like how far are they into the scenario, like how much do they
Mhm.
know, how much do they recognize like this is unhealthy, are they, how afraid are they, like they were so
And
so little.
sorry, Jasmine, how old were your daughters at this time? I'm just
um
curious. Yeah.
just about to be 3 and 4.
Okay, okay,
So
got it.
yeah, our youngest was going to be 3 in November, and this was all happening around from July to October is when I was in treatment and then leaving and all the things. But on my trauma egg, we're all four of us, and then in there is also like me holding a bottle of wine somewhere like in the sky kind of, and I drew this darkness around all of us, and then he's screaming all these horrible words around me, and they're kind of crouched down in the corner, confused and crying. And then outside of the darkness and all these horrible words are like, I love you. I'm sorry. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, I think you are smart. I mean, I wish I didn't call you that. I didn't say you are a bitch. I said you were being a bitch. Like, I'm not calling
Mm.
you stupid. I just think sometimes you don't think clearly, or like, whatever. And I was looking at my trauma egg, which you're supposed to burn, which that's a whole nother story. But I was looking at it after that scenario, after that incident happened, and I was like, this all of these things that have happened to me, that have happened for me, are not me and will never be me. The darkest place I've
Mm.
ever been in my life is with this man. How? I'm like looking at it and I'm like, how? And then I like looked at them, their stick figures on the poster, and I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I lived with monsters of men. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And, you know, even now I have to reflect on, you know, sometimes I have a little bit of mom guilt, but I also recognize that, like, if I was to still be alive at this point into our timeline, this current day, I would be a numbed out, probably drinking. Like, I wouldn't be healthy, right? Or I wouldn't be
Yeah.
alive at all. Because again, I would have, it wouldn't have taken long to get me back to thinking I was losing my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and so the straw that broke the camel's back was like that moment looking at my poster, and then he had gotten traded, so he was gone for like a month, and I had time to like be with just me and the girls. And I remember we went to the zoo. Oh, this memory is so rich, it's so good. We went to the zoo and we were walking around the zoo, and for the first time I felt like how you can feel now that I'm sober. I can feel intense joy, intense sadness. I know that I can feel them all. I remember and I smell the air right now. I see the giraffes. Like, I remember walking around the zoo and they're running it and they're walking in front of me and thinking to myself, this is what life would be like when it's just us three, you know? And I felt so at peace. It was just like, but it was a micro moment, right? It wasn't this big old thing, but I just remember the feeling of like, it was like you could paint us and we would stay there forever, you know? Like, and it just, I don't know, it was so magical to just, I think that was my higher power saying, like, this is what life can be. It's not always going to be roses, but this peace, you will and can feel that. People deserve that, you know, not just me, but people in general, especially, you know, if you're not in peace because of abuse, like, you don't have to be in that. And so it was beautiful. I didn't have to romanticize it. It was real. I
It
really
was
felt
real.
peace. Yeah, it wasn't me
Mhm.
telling myself a story. It was, and did that knowing of peace scare me? Because then it was like, all right, now it's about to get real, real. Now you have to, what's next? If this feels this peaceful and all these other layers are factual, now you actually have to uproot your life. You have to file the papers. You have to do these
Mhm.
things, logistical things that are stressful, that are emotionally taxing, that are financially taxing, that are, you know, um, and I did. I worked a lot. I cried a lot. I studied a lot. I did a lot. It was a lot of doing in the beginning.
And did your ex fight, quote, fight for the relationship? Did he push back? Was he like, you're making a mistake? Or did he accept that you're serious and this was the right thing to do for your family?
On paper, he contested twice, which but never really spoke about it. And instead of that, he did what my therapist in treatment said he may do, and I was like, "Girl, I don't know. You don't know him." Like, I'm still a little defensive at that time, and she said, "You know, when you leave him, he may try to take the girls from you." And I was like, "No, he knows I'm a
Oh,
good mom. He knows I'm a good mom. He knows who I am." No, he did just that. It didn't work, obviously, um, but he went from like, I love you, baby. I want us to work out. When I was just like, hey, but if we're going to work out, you got to do the work, you know? Like,
yeah,
I
right.
can't be, and I'll get to that in a second, but I've used this analogy since I had our first daughter, and I used it with everybody, including my brothers who really close with. I said, I am on this little tiny wooden boat with this tiny human. I am her first and last line of defense. Anthony, my brother, he's a healthy human, but I said, I love you. But if you come over here with that chaos, you got to get out of the way. I cannot risk tipping this boat over. Like,
Yep.
and then I'm with their dad and we're on our little steel boat, but it's still a little tiny boat. You cannot tip this boat over.
Um,
I have to keep her safe. So nobody, if anybody comes over here trying to rock this boat, you're out, you know? And so I really had to root into the fact of like, he's not going to try to get me back now because I'm not backing down. I'm not accepting your apology with no action. And when I said, hey, I'd like to do 60-40 custody because, you know, you're still playing, you're going to be traveling. I've been their primary parent because you've been the provider, that's fine.
yeah.
Um, he claims that that's why he said, I'm taking full custody. And not only did he try to take full custody, he had a extensive thing about me that was untrue. So I had to double back and like go to my treatment people and have them like show that I successfully completed treatment. I had to have all these things in place, and I was so vulnerable and willing to say to him, listen, I know that when I was drunk and upset at you, I called you a coward and a liar. I'm not proud of that. I
Right.
wish I could have handled our disagreements better, but I don't. I vividly remember when he told me he was trying to take full custody, and I tried to meet him at the park for one last like, hey, we don't have to be together, but like let's pretend like we loved each other at one point for whatever we knew love to be. And I remember crying to him, trying to make what I thought then was I was making an appropriate amends. Didn't know what I was doing, but crying to him, and I was like, I love you, and I'm grateful for the things that you have done for me. I'm grateful that you paid for treatment. I'm grateful that you gave me these beautiful girls. I'm grateful that, I'm able to do XYZ, but I do not owe you my life and I will not give it to you. And I was
Right.
so dead face about that. And I meant it and I mean it. And I don't think he has the emotional capacity to fully understand what I meant, but I sat in my power in that moment of like, I have done wrong in this relationship. I have put you in poor positions. I have called you names. I have, you know, um, been mean, nasty, and unkind. I have, but I'm a damn good mom and I don't owe you my life. I'm not giving it
Mm,
to you, So I think,
right.
no, he did in the end when he realized like, oh shit, that scare tactic didn't work. She didn't come
Right.
running back. Now she sees me and there's no coming back from that. And they can't be seen. When they see that you see them, then they just like they run amongst.
And I mean, he saw you stand in your power. Like
Yeah.
you meant what you said. And like that's the refreshing part of sobriety. When you have that clarity and that discernment and you decide like, no, I mean it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I am about what I say and I mean what I say. There's power there. And I think that can be frightening. And it sounds like that was his last, like what you said, like that was his last attempt to control you or
Mm-hmm.
to, yeah, I think it's a form of control. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna take the one thing that I know Jasmine needs and cares most about in this world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
please, that's not gonna work, thankfully, but like that's what he tried to do.
Yeah.
And that's
Well, he
cowardice. I
he
know that
was
you said that you shouldn't have called him coward. I think that's cowardice. I'm just gonna be honest.
Facts. Well, he wrote that the thing he wrote was like she went to treatment, she's an alcoholic, like things that I was owning. And
Yeah,
my lawyer was like, Jasmine, and my therapist all were like, not a single person is going to look at somebody who recognizes they were unhealthy and is actively trying to get better is going to look at that and go, shame on her, she doesn't deserve her
yeah,
kids. They're not. And I mean, I went through like going to the girls' school and having the teachers that know me. Again, I wasn't a daily lay in my bed all day drinker. I got drunk 3 times a month on a Saturday, but I went to every school thing. They always had fresh lunches packed. Like I was a very present mom. I breastfed both of them for a year, so I'm like I was there.
yeah.
Um, there was also a lot of pumping and dumping, but I was there. And so when that all happened, I went into like, okay, you want to do this? I'm going to go with facts. You can say whatever you want. You can gaslight, you can manipulate, but I have facts. So I had like 30 people that have been in our lives from the day I met him, from before him, to like times with the kids that all had half of those people had relationships with our daughters and with me with our daughters, right? Like little things. And my lawyer was like, you're not going to need it. I was like, I don't care. I don't care. I want it so that
Mhm.
if it ever was to come up, the judge is gets to see me. And then we had a person come and like investigate that he wanted. It worked out beautifully because she was like, best way to describe him is he berates her, he belittles her, and he gaslights her. And she said the best way
Wow.
to describe Jasmine
High.
is, yeah, she goes, best way to describe Jasmine in her situation, she makes decisions out of fear a lot of the time. And when she's emotionally regulated, chef's kiss. When she's not chef's kiss, a little chaos. And she's like, but Jasmine actively will take the feedback and will do the work and is the emotional safe space for the kids. And so when that all came out, he hated that lady. She was not smart, not accredited.
Well,
She's got a fake
yeah.
license, yada
She's a
yada
woman.
yada.
Let me ask you, do you think that if this is a hypothetical, of course,
Sure.
but if you didn't have the girls, so you were just with your ex, do you think you would have still left or it would have followed that same timeline?
I think it would have happened sooner. Um,
Oh, really? You think you would've left him before?
yeah, I don't think sobriety
You
would
were
have
like,
happened sooner.
okay,
I think I
I
would have
see.
left him sooner because having them, one, put me in a position where I was not, like, financially independent in any
Fair.
capacity,
Yeah,
and two, I was desperate for my perfect life. I was like,
gotcha.
"My daughters are gonna grow up with their dad in the house. We are gonna fix this, we're gonna make another baby through these problems. We're gonna just love and love and love, and we're gonna fight and be fine, and fight and be fine, and it's okay." But I got to the point also where I remember telling him, like, "You have to stop yelling at me because, in all honesty, I could be saying, 'I hope you die, jump off a bridge,' right? But I'm not yelling. I'm sitting crying,
Yeah,
right? And our
yeah,
daughters, I'm being serious. I'm sitting crying, and our daughters are witnessing this, and you are screaming in my face, this close, blah, blah, blah. So, I could be saying the worst thing of anybody's ever heard in their lives, but you are the person who appears to be the monster and they love
right.
you, baby." Like, I remember telling him these
Mhm.
things, like, before I was ready to leave him, like, as time was going on, I was like, "They love you, but they're gonna think that you are a monster, and that's not who I want them to think loves me, because that's what they're gonna equate this to, right? That's what they're gonna think." And so I
That's
remember
what I was
yeah,
thinking, like, we even your kids are young at this time, but that would be the first representation of what love is for them.
right.
Like, your father is typically the first man that you see as someone that loves you, and if
Mhm.
daddy loves mommy and daddy loves me, like, it's easy for that narrative to continue and that cycle to continue where you just think that that's
Right,
normal, that's
right.
totally normalized. Like, men that love me scream in my face, and
Yeah,
obviously, that's not the messaging that
right.
you want your daughters to learn.
Right. And even before, like, that just brings me back to, like, before going to treatment and getting sober, again, trying all things to make efforts, not ready to, like, equate some of the problems to my drinking. I knew I had the traumas. But I remember being like, "Let's separate, not divorce, not do anything crazy, but, like, you move
Mhm.
here, just move next door even, like, while we navigate, because this is what we do almost every day." This is so exhausting and it's so unhealthy for them, and I definitely think, I still sometimes struggle with sharing custody, but I also know
Mm,
that, like, when it comes down to it, there's legal reasons and there's things that come into play where there's just things that are, again, out of my control. However, I know when they land back here with me, like, this is their home. This
yeah,
is where they can be fully in their bodies, in their minds, in their spirits, in their emotions, and we just get to navigate that together. They get to human here, and, like, that's the
yeah,
biggest thing I could give them, because had I stayed with him and stayed an active alcoholic, they'd have no place to be a human. Maybe it would be school or the boyfriend's house or the best friend's
yeah,
house. It would be everywhere but where they lay their head every night. And I just didn't want that to be their lives.
yeah, you have that safe haven, it's a reprieve for them,
Yeah.
like, to your point, you are home, and when they come home, they know that their mom obviously, like, not to say their father doesn't love them in the
Mhm.
same way, but, like, you are a healing/healed version of self that can pour into them and show them, like, "Mommy chose me as a woman, I chose myself, and I choose you." And, like,
Mhm.
I think that is just so profound, and I grew up with mostly a single mom, and I think to her own detriment, like, she didn't date. I never saw her bring any guy around ever.
Mhm.
And selfishly, I really I'm just so thankful that my mom chose herself and chose me. Like, she came out of a pretty toxic relationship with my dad,
Mhm.
and I think it gave me a really good baseline for, like, what I deserve, like, as a human. Like, what do you deserve? And
Mhm.
I didn't have to see my dad also at his worst, like, like, because I know they had
Yep.
a toxic relationship, but I didn't have to see that, you know what I mean?
What
So
a
I
good
think
point you say. That's such a beautiful point. You don't have to see him at his worst, because, yeah, I love that.
because she chose to
Mhm.
separate, and I hope the same for your daughter. How has co-parenting been for you? So
You know, it is, and it's a constant navigation. I
yeah,
think it's a
I'm sure.
constant pocket of what can I control? What's worth the energy? And I think now that we are officially divorced, which that took a long time, I
How old are your girls
feel
now?
8 and 7.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. I feel now I don't know, I felt a lot of ease in co-parenting, not because it's easy, but because I just let it ride. I'm an excellent gray rocker. It took me
Yeah.
years, but I'm really am excellent at it now. And I think again, I'm so rich in my life. I have so many moving parts that these things, these um, minor attacks on my character, minor attacks on my life, I can just actively ignore them because I literally have so many beautiful, wonderful things that call my attention over here that I have, worked really hard to have in my life. So I'm like, I don't have the capacity for that. And we have we have a mechanism in place where, this lady who helps us communicate. So it's like if things
Okay.
are getting where like, hey, I'm not hearing that, there's a third party to go, hey, or
Beautiful.
if he can make that logical and it is not actually logical, then she can go, hey, like there's a voice of
Buffer.
reason, a
Yeah.
buffer. And so that creates a lot of peace. And, I am what I feel, and I've gotten feedback like this from my coworkers who are therapists, some of them, and from my therapist. I feel as though I do a good job of being honest with our daughters while respecting the age that they're at and the
Right.
relationship that they have with their father. Because at the end of the day, part of the reason I left him was to not taint, like you said with your mom, basically not taint their image of him.
Your
Like
perception. Yeah.
I'm not going to tell them that he was the perfect, most best ever because then I'm gaslighting them. But
Right.
I have told them, hey, mommy and daddy weren't healthy together. I don't just say me, I don't just say him. Mommy and daddy weren't healthy together. So, like, when they would ask questions at the beginning, I would say that is why, I like will speak to his strengths, like the good things about him when I share things with them. Or if they say, oh, well, daddy did this or his girlfriend did this, I'm like, oh, I love that. Like, I will always and forever want more pure, good love around my children, around anybody that I love. Like I want you to be engulfed in love all the time. What a beautiful feeling that is. So I always speak positively. And when I don't, because I'm a human, there's pockets of that, I will then, right my wrong by saying, hey, mommy was wrong and I da 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 da. Right? I was really upset about this, or I had to navigate this, or, I will explain to them. And like they come to me. There was moments where they were pretty not nice to me, especially our oldest daughter, and I was really struggling. And some of it was just a test to her age, because I have other friends who were like, I'm happily married and my daughter still acts like that, right? So that gave me some comfort. But then
Yeah.
I also recognized that she was angry at me, and trying to find ways to express it. And so
Mhm.
one of the most beautiful, beautiful things that has come out of, again, this perspective shift that I've been giving in sobriety is that at first, when I would have to combat the poor things that have been said about me in the other parents' household and with other grandparents and aunts and uncles and things, it was so devastating. And I would do the dance, and I would be performing, trying to tell them, trying to tell our small children, this is this and that is that and then. But now, because of the work I've done and the relationships that I have and the people that I'm able to get feedback from, I now am like, I look at these conversations that I have with my girls around some of the things that they're struggling with being in two households, as like beautiful ways to process. Like we process, like,
Mm.
okay, you're really angry about, yeah, XYZ because one person said this and then I'm saying this. Let's talk about it. Or like I've explained to them as time goes on, like you're gonna have you'll be able to have a feeling. Does that feel true to you? And like
Mhm.
let's talk about what that looks like. And then if you want to see the facts, I'm happy to share, like, again, age appropriate things. Um,
Right.
but I'm appropriately transparent with them, and I take accountability. I will say, you know what, mommy, I'm not being the best mom I want to be right now. Like I'm really frustrated, and I used to be back before we were officially divorced. I could be in a great mood and then I would get a really crabby message like, can you read? Or, you're so illogical still. And
Mm.
so it would still trigger me, or he'd say, you're being stupid. And then I'd be like, stop, don't call me stupid. He'd be like, I said, you're being stupid. And I'm like, oh, this is like being married. What am I doing?
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but stupid is a big trigger word for me. And he knew that. So I was like, I was feeding it though. I was arguing back,
Yeah.
right? Now and that used to set me off. So maybe I had the girls, and then I would get short. Then I'd be like, get in the bath, da, da, da. And I'm like, why am I?
Mhm.
The anger had to go somewhere, and here I am yelling at my kids. Like, what?
Mm.
Then I become this monster that I literally work so hard not to be for them in so many spaces. And now I was just telling my mom this and one of my girlfriends, like, I feel so rooted in my power as their mom. Like, that had been
Yeah.
something I was trying to prove for so long, but like now I just feel really rooted and grounded in it. So I'm not triggered by his little nuancing attacks on me. I just brush them off and or provide a factual thing behind them when one of my kids will ask me, hey, da da da. And I'm like, well, here's XYZ. You know, we navigate it
Gotcha.
together. Um, and I could give a small example if that's like, if there's room for that.
Of
Um,
course, yeah.
our oldest, and this would seem small unless people again understand. Our oldest, one day she comes home and she has to get her planner signed, and so I say, do this last little math in the morning, right? Because it's past your bedtime. And I say to her,
Mhm.
I'll sign your planner in the morning, and she goes, Mommy, Daddy said you don't have the privilege of signing my planner anymore. And I said, he said, what? And I like got her level, and I kind of was like, I said, am I your mom?
Yeah.
Do I feed you? Do you live here? Do you, do I go to all your school stuff? I said, have you asked your teacher? Like, and she's like, no. And I said, well, maybe tomorrow I'll ask her. So now fast forward to the morning and she's finishing her math. And I go, honey, bring me your planner so I can sign it. And she just starts sobbing. And I'm like, honey, why are you crying? What is the matter? Daddy's going to be mad at me and I'm confused because you said you can't sign it and daddy's saying you can't sign it. And I, at this point, I'm hot on the inside, but I'm not at her, obviously. I got on
Yeah.
my literal knees standing in front of her, right in front of her front door. And I said, baby, do you know what? Mommy's going to sign your planner because I am your mother and I have every single right to sign your planner. And you can tell daddy that I said I was signing it. So if daddy wants to be mad, daddy will be mad at me. And do you understand? I always have your back. When you're mad, I have your back. When you're not being kind, I have your back. When you're being a
Mhm.
grouch miser, which is what I call them, I have your back. I always have your back, 100% against anybody or for anybody, with anybody. And I said, but I'm going to sign this planner, And like little things, they sometimes they wouldn't hug me if he was around. They would like wave by and
Mm.
not say I love you, and I that used to hurt me so bad. And then I thought like maybe I should stop going to school events when he's there and like, not make them uncomfortable. And I got feedback
Oh,
about
man.
that. I know, which I'm definitely not doing that, but I had thought about it. And so, our daughter, our youngest, wouldn't hug me one time. And I said, why wouldn't you give mommy a hug? And she was like, because daddy would have been mad because we would have been late leaving the appointment. And I'm like, okay, but she's crying
Okay.
saying it. And I'm like, these are the things that I combat. But then I've made it not about me. I'm like, they don't
Right.
really feel this way. And I know that they love me. So I know when they come home and they're stomping off and they're getting all their feelings out is because I have the capacity for them.
Right.
I am the safe place. So they do this here and I let it happen. There's a respect, right? We're doing this fine line of like,
Of
you have to
course,
respect
of
me.
course, but the fact that they can release those feelings or be their authentic selves with you is a testament to you as a mother, right? Because if they have to present themselves in a different way, in a different
Mm-hmm.
light, fear might be not be the best word, but like in response to daddy's sensitivity or like
Mm-hmm.
daddy's response, I think that is telling. Like I think you as a mom, unfortunately, and I just want to say like I want to give you the space and grace because I can imagine how difficult that is, even though like you have the wherewithal and like you have the emotional maturity to not personalize it because you know that your
Mm-hmm.
daughters care and they love you. That still must hurt. And like that's still hard, right? To like be on the receiving end all the time and having to be the bigger person. And like I just want to say like you're doing hard work and
Thank you.
I can only imagine, but like also it just sounds tricky to navigate even
Yes.
to
Yeah, and I'm so grateful. I will say community is, I saw this video the other day that woman was like, you guys, we all talk a lot about community, but like community also means sitting in discomfort. It means having hard conversations.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that is my community. They will check me in the most they hold me in the most firm and gentle way possible, and I can come undone in these incredibly safe spaces with these people that'll say, hey, that does not deserve your energy, or yo, that needs to change. Like you need to work on
Right.
this, or, and they don't say it like that. That's just how I'm talking. But like
No, obviously.
yeah,
I get
I
it, I
get
get it.
a lot of support and challenge. And I'm so grateful for that because these are the people that care about who I am, not just like face value or what I have to do for them or how I can serve them. They genuinely care
Mhm.
about my well being, which obviously so beautifully flows into my kids' well being. And so I'm able to show up, I'm able to pivot constantly because I receive feedback sometimes whether I ask for it or not, but usually it's It's unsolicited and solicited because they know me and they know like, hey, Jazz could use a little support right now, right?
Let's trust.
Yeah,
Fair.
and I am so, so grateful for that because without that, I wouldn't be able to do this for the next I wouldn't be able to do it well.
11-ish years.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, butterflies, let me let you in on a little secret. Self-care is so much more than just bubble baths. It's about finding what makes you feel your very best, inside and out. And that's why I've been obsessed with ClassPass for years. Whether I'm crushing a Pilates class, getting a fresh blowout, or treating myself to a relaxing facial, ClassPass lets me explore all kinds of fitness and wellness options. With just one membership, I can book workouts, beauty treatments, and so much more, all in one app. I've been a member since 2016, and I've booked over 500 reservations. ClassPass makes it easy and fun to prioritize my health and happiness, all while staying on budget. And because I want you to feel just as amazing as I do, I've got an exclusive offer for my listeners. Sign up with my special link and you'll get a free trial and 20 bonus credits to use toward any classes or services you want to try. So, what are you waiting for? Take that first step toward feeling your best. Head to ClassPass to get started today.
Okay, Jasmine. So just winding down here. Winding down. Wow. Winding down here.
Same.
Old habits die hard. I was just wondering from you, have you created space in your life? Because one of the topics and questions I get asked the most about on this podcast is love, relationships. And it sounds like your relationship with self has drastically improved. It sounds like you've done a ton of work and are still doing said work. It sounds like your relationship with your kids has grown and it's authentic to you and your parenting style. And as mentioned, like you depersonalize a lot of things for the sake of your children. And I feel like the ultimate, not the ultimate form, but like a lot of parents, like that's a part of being a parent, right? Sacrifice
Mhm.
and like doing things for the good and the benefit of your children. But what about Jasmine? Like in terms of romantic relationships, are you open to dating? Are you dating? Have you healed from some of the trauma that you've experienced with your ex or exes in the past?
Yeah. So, wait, I am open to dating. I am.
Okay,
I've made attempts, and I'll try for a little, and then I just don't try at all. Then I try for a little.
fair.
Um, there is somebody in my life who's taken up some space. Yet to like meet my daughters, and I don't even know if that's going to happen. But I do enjoy his company. I feel very safe with him.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm enjoying him, for now. So we'll see.
Does
But I
he honor your sobriety? Is he
Yes,
I'm at like I feel like I know the answer. It's kind of rhetorical because I can
yeah.
tell how seriously you take your sobriety, but he's someone that understands and respects your sobriety and recovery.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say he understands. I don't think he fully, like, has a
Okay.
grasping of, like, what it looks like and why, right, for anybody really, but he does not put any pressure on me. He respects that, like, "Hey, this is something that she doesn't do. This is a boundary she set for herself." Like, "Cool." Like,
Okay. Okay.
he's not a man of many, many words, but he
Okay.
does not, he doesn't question if I say, "This is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing." He's not like, well, why don't you drink? And da, da, da. And like, he
Okay.
knows why I don't drink, but he doesn't push me about it. He just
Okay.
respects me. So I don't think he understands. And it's not necessarily something that like he needs to fully understand because it's my own experience, but he respects my values and my choices. And I will say, as far as my dating has gone, I was very intentional about working on also my relationship to sex.
Mhm.
Because I historically, again, wanted to be in a relationship so I could have sex as much as I wanted, right? And not
Same.
necessarily anything wrong with that, but not if you're using it as a scapegoat for all of your sufferings. Um, so I took over a year of like no sex, no dating, no relationships. And then, I met somebody through a friend. And so I was like, "Ooh, okay, let's see, and a little bit of that. And he was so great. But what I will say that came out of also sobriety for me was that I can look back on my relationship timeline and I can see that every man served a different purpose. So, like,
Mm.
maybe this guy was super serious and rigid. So, this guy had to be like super goofy and like unhinged.
Mm.
And then this guy was a drug dealer. And so he was unhealthy, right? But then
So
he's
this
like
guy
this.
needs to be a hedge fund owner.
Right, right. I have to go to the business guy now who now is literally beating me, but who cares? He's
Mhm.
got a business and he looks great on paper and everybody loves him and
Mm.
whatever. And then I had to go from that to like somebody who loves me so much and is love bombing me. Like all these men, it didn't matter how many red flags they had, as long as as long as they didn't trigger this thing in me, and I didn't realize this at the time, but they all were a little
Mm.
bit, they were all vastly different than the person before. They were serving some purpose. If I had never laughed with you, I was going to take somebody who could never be serious. If I had never
Yeah.
been able to like get anything done with you and like be an adult with you, I was going to be with somebody who had no personality, who was always this and always structured. And so I've learned in my sobriety that, like, number one, it's okay if you date him and he's not the love of your life and you guys don't get married and whisk off into the sun and have a third baby. It's okay.
Amen.
Man.
Amen.
Right? And then
Yep.
I also had to learn that it's okay to decide, no, I don't like that about you. And then that's it. You don't have to go explaining it. You don't have to go trying to change it. You don't have to go trying to be like, well, I like this about him. You don't have to start weighing your options like you're adding shit to your Chipotle. Just you don't like it,
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's okay. And then the last thing is like I had to really, really accept the fact that I am not alone because there's something functioningly wrong with me. I am
Right.
alone because I am dedicated and committed to rebuilding or just even building my life in the first place. And I've never experienced myself in the capacity that I have. And I'm grateful for the time that I've had
Mm.
to pour into my daughters instead of, I'm glad I didn't find the love of my life 6 months after I left my ex husband because I wouldn't have had, no matter how much I love my girls and how much this person would have been great, I still wouldn't have
The
been able to pour into
capacity.
them, right, the way that I
Mhm.
have been able to. And so really, I have really seriously learned that like I also need to keep showing up as the woman that I am and building the things I want to build so I can meet a person who I can meet a mirror. I don't want the mirror to be this bad reflection of me in the past. I want it to be this reflection of me now. And I forget the last part that I was going to say, but um, as I've been navigating relationships, I have learned that like I don't need anybody for anything.
Right.
I have wants and desires that I'm now learning like how to still do it just because I want it. I'm usually like,
Right.
if I don't need to, I won't. Everything has been like a need because I've been so busy trying to like get my feet out of the cement. Like I've been trying to rebuild something and scaling them out. And as my one friend would say, I'm scaling them out with 2 kids on my back. Like I can't afford a lot of things mentally,
Yeah.
physically, emotionally. And so now that I kind of feel like I've reached a good place and I'm ready to keep climbing. But now I'm like, I'm in a really beautiful place in my life and my careers. I would love to meet somebody and climb with them the next mountaintop with our daughters, like hand in hand, and create something really beautiful and special. And I've always believed in love. I just didn't have a clue what it was because I had none of it for
Right.
myself. You know.
Right. Or I think maybe what you mentioned before, the version of love that you believed in wasn't real. Like this
Mm-hmm.
romanticized, idealized version of love for the fairy books where it's like, yeah, I'm going to meet my Prince Charming and sail away and, into the sunset, where like the realities of life don't really like lend itself to that. And like the thing about fairy tales, truthfully, is like we don't get to see what happens after happily ever after, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like when things get real, life gets real, I think that's the love that I'm seeking, where it's like it stands the test of time. And for many years, going back to like conflating sex and like my reasoning to have sex for that connection, it was always about like intensity versus intimacy. And like I
Mm-hmm.
was confusing the two. Like I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like everything had to be hard and fast. Like that's just how I live my life as well. And now I'm seeking like true intimacy. And to your point, like not every guy needs to, or every relationship needs to fulfill this like deep seated urge within me. It's like I can see people at face value. That's the clarity
Mm-hmm.
that pervades through all aspects of my life. Like I can see things for what they are, and I can discern if I want to continue seeing this person for who they are or move on. And I
Mm-hmm.
before, I think I was so invested in like just showing up as a version of self that someone else would like whether that was true or authentic to me or not. Like I just wanted to be someone that someone else chose and
Mm-hmm.
liked, and now I don't do that. And like that's what I was thinking too when you were sharing about like the lies that we tell other people. I think the true lies um were worse that I told myself. Like, I could
100%.
be this version of self for other people. And now I'm just like, well, first of all, who are you? Like, do the work there. And then, yeah, like, it's okay. You don't have to be everyone's cup of tea. Like, not everyone needs
Yes.
to like you. And
Yes.
that's okay. And I
Yeah.
don't need to like everyone else either.
Yeah.
And it's fine. Everything's fine. There's billions of people on the planet.
Yeah. I love
So,
everything's fine. The kids are all right. Everything's fine.
like, they're right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love this conversation so much. One last question before
Sure.
you go. What is the most integral part or piece or tool when it comes to your sobriety? What is something that you cannot live without that you feel like has, I don't want to say live without, that sounds very dramatic. What is one thing,
I
what
don't
is
function
one
well without.
aspect?
Sorry.
Yes, what is an aspect of your sobriety, just something that has really helped you stay grounded in this work that you're doing on yourself?
Um, for me, movement has
Oh,
been, oh my gosh, like I know I see you too on social media. Like I know movement for you is a lot meaningful. I have to move my body. I have to be very mindful of like to breathe because that was another thing I would realize like, oh, I haven't taken a breath in a minute here, like
yeah, tensing up, like you can feel
yes.
the, yeah.
Yes, so a lot of breathing. Yoga has become really important to me because it adds all the components. It adds mind, body, spirit, and the movement. Um, so I would definitely say movement. And I really, truly do my best to stay mindful of like, this is not the life that you thought you'd have, but this is the most beautiful life that you have ever had, And
No.
if this is as beautiful as it gets, well, good goddamn lucky me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I try to stay in a space of gratitude because I have noticed one of the biggest shifts for me to help me have a healthy sobriety is that I have to have perspectives that are positive, that
right.
it all in all reflects the actual situation. I'm not catastrophizing, nor am I existing in this like super fear that freezes me, that used to freeze me. And
Mhm.
I also think that saying time heals all wounds, like sure, that's facts, right? But I have learned that time and work heal all wounds. I
Right.
could sit in time for the next 5 years and have not done a damn thing and been the same version of
Mhm.
myself. I could still have left him and stop drinking, but if I hate the world hates me, I'm angry because I
Yeah,
was, and I'm sad, and I'm sad, and you should be sad too, and misery loves
right.
company, and I could have to remain this way.
Hurt people, yeah.
That is like my favorite, which is where I can find grace a lot for the father of my children, my ex-husband. Like, because I know
Mhm.
I say that all the time, hurt people, and misery loves company, whether they know it or not. And like all these things are very true. And so the biggest things are the movement and the perspective. I don't do myself justice if I start down the rabbit hole of these negative thoughts. So I am very mindful of like, that's not accurate, Jazz. Like it can be a valid feeling in this particular circumstance or situation, but now
Right.
you are taking the inch that this feeling has caused you and you're adding a mile and then you're adding 14 more. Then
Spiraling.
you are not Forrest Gump. Like stop,
Yeah.
pause.
Slow down.
Yeah, take the
Yeah.
breath, move your
And that's
body.
where the movement comes into play, right? Especially when you're doing the breathing exercises or you're practicing yoga or you're in your body and you're
Hmm.
forcing yourself to be present in this moment because to your point, the catastrophizing is very easy to do. And the
Hmm.
next thing you know, you're in this deep hole and it's like the sunken place. Like, how do I get out of here? How did I get here? But it starts with a seed, like that one
Yeah.
thought, which can be true, right? It could be like if someone calls you stupid, yeah, of course I'm going to be like, what the hell? Like now I I feel like I can carry that and that can lead me to many different places. And then ultimately going back to gaslighting, like that's when you start to believe it, right? Because you've
Hmm.
allowed this thought to grow into something really insidious
Yeah.
and
I know what
yeah,
you mean.
insidious and like untrue for the most
Yeah.
part. And so yeah, I relate to so much of what you shared, movement and mindfulness, like being very careful about what you tell yourself,
Yeah. How far I let the
because you
thought
can
go.
control that, how far you let the thought go.
I work in a space of recovery and I teach yoga. So
It's
I get
beautiful.
like these beautiful pockets, right? But when I was able to recognize like at one point in my sobriety, I was struggling. Like I didn't necessarily want to drink, but I kind of wanted to blow up my life. I kind of wanted to do Selena's hotel room with the boyfriend and just start being crazy, right? But in
Yep.
every aspect, I wanted to trash my house, trash my office, like just be
Mhm.
crazy. And I had this
I think
period of
it's by the
time.
way, I think we're accustomed to the chaos. Like,
Oh yeah.
when you've lived in that mindset or that, like, lifestyle for so long, it's like, "Whoa, everything's fine," like, that's a problem. Like,
Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
continue.
and I was starting to feel what I would equate to envy for clients who, would come in and tell me their stories and they were blowing up their lives here and dropping bombs here. And I was romanticizing, like sitting in the woods and getting high for days. And I was like, that just sounds so freeing. Like, I mean, again, I
Mhm.
know the thoughts are like, what?
Yep.
I went away from the first thought, but I had it. And that was happening more and more. And I remember I called like my sponsor and I said to her, I am really far removed and I'm afraid that I can't go back. I haven't drank, right? I haven't used a substance, but I'm far out. And I was recently saying this to my brother because he was going through his own experiences and I was like, I feel like I am out in the middle at the edge of the plank, right? And now like the risk is I jump like I'm so I walked myself out here now because I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so stressed. I'm not moving my body. I'm not talking to people. I'm not sharing what's really going on. Everything's fine. I'm going back to these things that were keeping me like this, and I'm at the plank now at the edge, and I don't want to jump. I don't want to blow my life. I don't want to drink. I don't even like the thought of alcohol. Like, ugh, I
Right.
don't want to do any of that. But yet I'm afraid to walk back. I'm literally
Mhm.
afraid that this plank is rocky and this plank, I mean, it's wobbly. It's in the middle of the ocean. It's bopping up and down. Like what I was saying to my brother, I'm like, but something that, and to my clients at the office in a recovery group, I said, I'm so fortunate to now have the perspective of yes, I'm on the plank, but every time I show up today at the office and I treat you with kindness and respect, that's a baby step back to the middle of the boat. Every time
Mhm.
I don't react to my children in a way that doesn't feel like the mother I want to be, that's a walk closer to the middle of the boat. And in the
Mm.
middle of the boat is community, our solutions and abundance of them.
Right.
Are,
Right.
somebody that will literally and figuratively hold me, are
Mhm.
the music that makes you laugh and cry, are the yoga classes, are the stern, like Jasmine, what are you doing? Like, are the reality checks? The middle of the boat is so great. And now I'm in the middle of the plank, and yeah, it's rocky, and I still can risk now, like, oops, I fell off the plank, and that's essentially, oops, I blew up my life. However, I know now from being, time in my recovery and like working on things with myself. I know now the people and the things that are on this boat, if I articulate where I'm at, if I'm honest with myself first, and then I'm able to
Always.
share and be vulnerable and give myself grace and give somebody access to these vulnerabilities, they are going to say, "Baby girl, here is a metal bar. Hold on to this as you walk back to
Yeah.
us."
Yeah.
Like so I was just like saying to him, I'm not frozen by fear anymore. I'm
Mhm.
very confident now that not only does my relationship with my higher power, it's like a rainbow. It's bright and it's beautiful and it's glittery, and I perfectly identify it into a book or into a scripture or into somebody else's opinion, but mine is rich. I feel
Expansive.
mine, and
Mhm.
I'll end this kind of part with back to like when I felt my heart break open. My yoga mentor, a beautiful, also survivor, independent woman, like Latina, like just veteran, like this person who I just have a lot of admiration and respect for. She leads also beautiful meditations in yoga. And one day she did a lot of heart openers. And every time I'm crying in these heart openers, and I still sometimes do, but she's leading this beautiful meditation and she's like, there's this little, flower inside of us all. And, we have to open our hearts and like be with that flower and let it grow. And it came over me and I like came out of the meditation. I just went immediately to my journal and I'm crying and I'm like, my whole life, my heart has been breaking as a little girl being sexually abused, growing up in violence, being in the womb of my mom experiencing like being beaten, and working several jobs and being poor. Like, so all of my life, my heart has been like little cracks in it. And I just keep sewing, or like maybe the nice
Mhm.
babysitter sews, or the boyfriend who tried to help me sews, or the stranger, the Jehovah's Witness I met when I was blacked out when I was 20 sews, like
Mhm.
people. And I kept trying to sew it right back together, like because she can't break open, she's too fragile, or it's dangerous.
Mhm.
And after my experience in treatment and feeling it break open, that little flower that had been in there this entire time, this little beautiful bud, I just kept sewing it back in there. I didn't give it an opportunity to grow, to blossom. And now it's like this whole time in sobriety, I have been so, so, so beautifully, gracefully, just like lovingly, stronghold, like held together by incredible women in my life. And so like I visually can see these women just like holding this heart up of mine as I've been slowly sewing it back together. And as I'm
Mm,
slowly sewing, the flower has blossomed and more flowers have blossomed. And I feel like, wow, you are so alive and well, because to be alive is one thing, and then to be well is a whole other entity of like
right.
faith without works, right? And so recognizing that, it doesn't make me feel like, ugh, all these broken parts, all this trial and error. It makes me feel like I had to go through these experiences so that the flowers that came out of my heart, that I kept on trying to hurry and keep these little buds small and unimportant to me, I had to break open. They had to fully blossom. And now I'll always have that little opening where they've made space, but beautiful, more for love and light to pour in. But that meditation, again, gave me the perspective shift that I needed, which is why I value being in spaces where people have the capacity to not only hold space, but create space and be containers to be safe places for people, which is why I value that so much in who I am, how I show up to people. But that is something I learned from my community. I didn't learn that growing up as a child. I didn't learn that inherently. I think I inherently am a nurturer and an empath, but I didn't learn what to do with those things, you know?
That is so beautiful. Like literally having chills, Jasmine. Um, Thank you so much for sharing your message and speaking of light and holding space. Like, I've learned so much from you, and I feel like you have so much to share and so much value to bring to folks at home. So, thank you for coming on today.
Thank
If someone wants to connect with you, I know that you are a yoga instructor, I know that you work in recovery, as mentioned. So, can you let people know at home if they want to connect with Jazz, how can they find you?
Okay, I love that. So I have social media. I'm not so good on like business things, which I'm working on, y'all. But my social media, I have it in my Insta, and you can always pop a message over there with me. My Insta is Shanae.Jasmine, and it's Chanae period Jasmine, Jasmine. And I
Okay.
have also a business page called renewed.life, and the whole concept behind this page, it's there, it's mine, but I haven't loved on it enough yet, is just going to be kind of an all-encompassing of all of these beautiful ingredients that I've built this like healthier life in. And it's renewed, like RE, and then the word nude dot life.
Okay. I'm gonna drop all of that in the show notes
Yeah.
for folks
She's
at
like, don't spill
home
it.
to find you easily. Yeah, like I'll just make it easy. I'll put it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And like I said, like you've been such an inspiration. Your story is so beautiful, and I connected so much to everything that you've shared. So thank you for coming on the Sober Butterflies. And you're welcome anytime. Like truly,
Thank you,
truly.
Nadine. I loved it. It was an honor and my pleasure and very fun. So it's cool. Thank you. I appreciate you.